Her daughter-in-law raised a glass and called her a joke, while standing in the house she didn't pay for. Marlene Whitaker, widowed CPA and silent funder, didn't flinch. Sadie smiled like she'd won something. Connor didn't say a word. By morning, the locks would be changed, the deed revoked, and her name scrubbed from the will. She'd spent a decade giving them comfort. Now, she was reclaiming her terms. And when they tried to post their pain for sympathy, the wire transfers would post back. Alright, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. The clink of crystal cut through the air like a warning bell. Marlene stood near the fireplace, fingers wrapped around a slender flute of champagne, its bubbles rising too fast, like the pulse in her throat. The room hummed with low laughter, designer candles flickering atop faux marble countertops, and the scent of spiced pear mixing with cedar wood diffusers. The house she bought echoed with other people's voices. Sadie, in a silky champagne dress that didn't quite match the drink in her hand, stepped onto the shallow step between the kitchen and the living room. Her cheeks were flushed, either from the rosé or the attention. Probably both. She raised her glass. To the woman we all tolerate, for her wallet. The room burst into laughter. Not a knee-slapping roar, but that polite, awful kind. The kind that comes from people not brave enough to stay silent. Even Connor chuckled, soft and hollow. Marlene didn't blink. She raised her glass halfway, not in agreement, not in salute, but in acknowledgement. She looked directly at Sadie, who gave her a wink like this was all some harmless joke between friends. Then she sipped, and Marlene didn't. She lowered her glass gently onto the side table, the clink of it against the surface quieter than the music, but louder than the breath she let out through her nose. "Oh, she's just being funny, right?" came a tentative voice. Marlene turned. Jenna, the neighbor from across the cul-de-sac, slim, mid-40s, with the permanent look of someone trying not to offend anyone at all. Marlene's voice was smooth as polished glass. "Oh, she's crystal clear." The music shifted, some upbeat indie pop track pulsing beneath the awkward quiet that now lingered between the cliques of guests. Sadie had already moved on, laughing with two women in pointed heels and bouncy curls, talking about custom backsplash colors like nothing had happened. Connor finally approached, holding two empty red Solo cups like they might protect him. "Hey, Mom, having fun?" Marlene looked at him a moment too long. Then, "It's beautiful what you've done with the place." He grinned, relieved, like he didn't hear the layer beneath. In the same place she'd paid for? Every square inch, from the lot purchase to the staging. Marlene excused herself from the living room crowd and wandered toward the hallway, her heels silent on the dark hardwood floor she had selected last winter. She ran her fingers along the edge of the hallway console. Cheap, already nicked. A framed photo of Sadie and Connor at the beach leaned too far back, its plastic frame wobbling when touched. In the guest room, someone had forgotten to open a vent. The air was stale and faintly sour with leftover balloons and deflated streamers. She opened her phone. Her lock screen was calm. A blue horizon over Lake Travis, taken the day the offer had been accepted. She remembered standing with Jordan, the realtor, who said, "This is the kind of investment that will hold." She tapped through her folders. House docs, then LLC assets. There it was, Whitaker Holdings, LLC. Property deed, 119 Marigold Crest Lane. Owner of record, Whitaker Holdings. Managing member, Marlene J. Whitaker. Transfer of title, not executed. She zoomed in on the signature line. Still blank. She never signed the quitclaim. Never transferred title. All she'd done was give them keys. In the living room, Sadie's laugh rose again. The same light, airy sound she'd perfected for brunches and sponsored Instagram videos. But to Marlene, it sounded like a match being struck too close to something dry. Marlene didn't smile. She turned down the brightness on her phone, locked the screen, and slipped it into her clutch. Jenna passed by again. "Need anything?" she asked. Marlene answered gently. "No, just remembering what belongs to me." The music swelled again. Someone raised a glass in a corner and the sound of Sadie's voice rang out. "To freedom. And finally being home." Marlene stood still, the word home turning to dust in her ears. Her hand rested lightly on her phone, because now she remembered something Sadie clearly never knew. The house didn't belong to Sadie. Not legally, not even a little. The laughter from the party still echoed in Marlena's ears as she pulled into her driveway, the night air cool against the heat that still burned low in her chest. She didn't bother turning on the porch light. Instead, she walked inside, slipped off her shoes, and sat at the antique secretary desk in the corner of her den, the same one she used when managing portfolios in another lifetime. She opened her laptop, fingers steady, movements practiced. Her reading glasses slid into place. The glow of the screen painted soft shadows across the dark room. Outside, the wind rustled faintly through the oak trees. Folder, Whitaker Holdings, LLC. Subfolder, Assets, Property Documents, 119, Marigold Crest Lane. She clicked. There it all was. Clean, clear, permanent. Purchase agreement signed. Wire transfer confirmed. Orty deed recorded. Quitclaim deed unsigned. Marlene scrolled down slowly, the trackpad cool beneath her fingertips. The final page stood blank except for a line that read, in stark serif font, "Signature of grantor." She had never signed it. On purpose. They'd rushed the move-in. Sadie insisted the cabinets needed repainting, that the walls felt too sterile for her brand's aesthetic. Marlene had offered to take care of it. "We'll handle it, Marlene," Sadie had chirped. "You just enjoy retirement." She clicked open the tax folder. As she suspected, the house had been purchased under her LLC, a protective structure she'd used for years. Safer, cleaner. Sadie had mocked the name once. Whitaker Holdings? Sounds like an investment vampire. And Marlene had smiled politely, knowing full well Sadie didn't understand a single thing about how wealth was actually kept. The screen lit up with a ping, a message from Jordan Bennett, her realtor of over a decade. "Hey Marlene, everything okay? Saw you at the Crest Lane party." She called instead. Jordan answered on the second ring, voice warm, gravelly, familiar. "Didn't expect to hear from you tonight." "I have a quick question," she said calmly. "Did I ever sign the quitclaim deed for the Marigold Crest property?" Jordan paused. "Let me check. One sec." A few clicks on his end, the sound of soft jazz in the background. Then, "Nope, you never signed it. In fact, I've got the original right here in my cabinet. I always keep physicals for my legacy clients." A small laugh. "I figured you'd get around to it, but honestly, it's all still in your name." Marlene leaned back in her chair, letting the words settle. "They think they own it," she said, almost absently. "Well," Jordan said, "they don't." She ended the call, politely thanking him with the same cool tone she used to deliver earnings forecasts back in the 90s. Then she opened a blank document. The keys clicked softly. Subject: Revocation of Occupancy, 119 Marigold Crest Lane. Sent. Effective immediately. Dear Connor and Sadie, per the absence of a legal transfer of title or signed quitclaim deed, I am revoking your permission to occupy the property located at... The rest wrote itself. She didn't rage. She didn't cry. She cited statutes, outlined timelines, attached evidence. She copied Jordan on the email. Then she hit print. One for her files, one for legal service. As the printer hummed, a soft warmth settled into her bones, the kind that came not from vindictiveness, but from precision. She had spent decades surrounded by arrogant men who underestimated her. Sadie wasn't even subtle about it. But tonight's laughter had given her something valuable. Clarity. Marlene shut down her laptop, folded the letter, and placed it on top of her desk with the same care as setting a chess piece into its final square. Then she turned off the lights, pulled the blanket over her knees on the couch, and closed her eyes. The smell of stale champagne still hung in the air when Marlene parked at the curb. A burst balloon clung to the edge of the mailbox like a limp afterthought. The string, tangled in the post, trembled slightly in the morning breeze. Through the large bay window, she could see movement. Sadie in a robe, barefoot, hair pulled into a messy knot, pacing with a trash bag. The aftermath of celebration never looked pretty in daylight. Marlene stepped out. heels clicking on the sidewalk with calm precision. She held a leather folder tucked under her arm and a manila envelope in her hand, sealed, labeled, and legally weighted. The sun hadn't fully risen, but the sky was already bright, casting soft gold over the pristine white stucco Sadie had insisted on choosing. Sadie, a silver SUV rolled up beside her. The window slid down. "Morning, Miss Whitaker," came the smooth voice of Lisa Mendez, property manager and notary. Marlene nodded. "Thank you for being prompt." Lisa handed over a clipboard. "Sign and timestamp here and we're good to go." Marlene signed, flipped the folder closed, then approached the door. She didn't knock. Instead, she rang the doorbell once, firm, clean. It echoed inside like a warning bell. The door swung open. Connor stood there, wearing an old college hoodie, eyes bleary. "Mom?" he asked, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's kind of early. Everything okay?" She held out the envelope. "This is for both of you." Sadie appeared behind him, frowning, clutching a mug. Her robe was slightly open at the collar, revealing a tank top with glittery letters that read, "Blessed AF." Connor took the envelope, peeled it open. Sadie leaned over his shoulder. Her voice cracked the quiet. "What the hell is this?" Connor read aloud, slowly. "Immediate notice of revocation of occupancy, effective today, due to absence of legal transfer, per LLC statutes. Authorization to vacate within 14 calendar days." What? Sadie yanked the paper from his hand, her eyes scanning faster than she could comprehend. "She's taking it back," she barked, snapping her eyes up to Marlene. Marlene stood without flinching, hands clasped in front of her. "Correct." Connor blinked. "Mom, what is this?" "It's clarity," she said softly. Sadie stepped forward, voice rising. "You can't just evict us. This is our home. No," Marlene cut in, her tone firm but even. "It's a home you live in, not one you own." Sadie's laugh was sharp, stunned. "This is punishment. You're punishing us because I made a joke at a party." "You made a statement," Marlene replied. "I'm just responding in kind." Connor's mouth opened, then closed. He looked torn, like a child watching two parts of his world come undone. "You didn't say anything last night. You smiled." "I waited," Marlene said. "You both seemed so sure. I was only here to sign checks and stay out of the way, so I thought..." "Why interrupt a performance?" Sadie's voice dropped, venomous. "You're manipulating us. This is emotional blackmail and paperwork." "No," Marlene said, her gaze steady. "This is legal clarity, the kind you get when you stop pretending gifts are obligations." Behind them, the house was still a mess. Party trays with congealed cheese, a tipped-over vase of wilting flowers on the island, a stack of half-wrapped housewarming gifts on the dining table. It looked like the inside of a lie that had been lived in just a little too long. Lisa Mendez stepped up onto the porch now, clipboard in hand. "I'll leave a second copy inside the front door for you both," she said, her voice clipped but professional. Sadie crossed her arms. "You think you're clever? You think you're proving a point?" Marlene tilted her head slightly. "You wanted the house," she said, her voice low, deliberate. "You just forgot who held the key." The first sign of fire didn't come from Sadie's mouth. It came from her fingers. Marlene was pouring her second cup of coffee when her phone buzzed. Then again. And again. By the time she reached it, 5 notifications lit the lock screen. All from Jenna. Sadie's blowing up IG. "You okay?" She's not naming you, but it's obvious. She's saying someone blindsided them out of spite. Marlene set the cup down, lips tight, steam curling into her face. She opened Instagram. Sadie's story was mid-spin. Soft piano music, a moody beige filter, and her teary face, eyes glassy and wide. "Sometimes people pretend to be generous," Sadie whispered into the camera. "But when you stop feeding their need for control, the mask slips, and they take everything back, just to hurt you." A poll followed. "Ever been betrayed by family?" "Yes. Still healing." Below it, a blurry image of a cardboard box labeled "Kitchen" sat by the front door of the house Marlene still legally owned. Not a single name was mentioned, but the subtext was volcanic. Within minutes, the sympathy comments rolled in. "You don't deserve this. Toxic family is the worst. I'll build that house with love." Marlene didn't reply. Instead, she opened her photo roll, found the one she needed. A simple scan. Wire transfer confirmation. AE, Marigold title and escrow. Amount, $764,500. 0 cents. From Whitaker Holdings, LLC. She uploaded it in a single square post, no caption, no hashtags, just the date. Clear as crystal, March 3, 2023. Within an hour, the tide shifted. Wait, she paid for it? That's a wire receipt. That's real. Is this the actual owner? Sadie lied? Then came the silence from Sadie's account. No new stories, no replies, just a void. Connor's text came at 11:42 a.m. "Can we talk? Just you and me? Please, without Sadie." Marlene stared at it for a long moment before typing, "No, legal notices are already underway. Any communication will go through the proper channels." 3 dots blinked for several seconds, then disappeared. Her phone rang next. Jordan. "Morning, Marlene," he said, tone dry. "Saw the social circus. I assumed you would," she replied. "Well," he chuckled, "your response was cleaner than any press release I've seen this year. Respect. Just keeping things factual." He cleared his throat. "We've officially filed occupancy revocation. I sent copies to my legal contact to prep the 14-day order. Once they're served, they're on the clock. And there's no loophole they can squeeze through? Not unless they invent a deed out of thin air. You're clean." Marlene walked to the window and looked out over her quiet backyard. Her magnolia tree was just starting to bloom. "Let them spin," she said softly. "Spinning doesn't change the floor beneath them." Jordan hesitated. "You should know, their site's trying to contact local agents. Word travels fast in Austin." "I'm not worried about agents," she replied. "I'm concerned with records, and those don't lie." A pause. Then a text from Jenna buzzed through with a screenshot. "Sadie and Saul Co. Upcoming collab launch postponed due to unforeseen internal realignment." Underneath, the caption, "Looks like that sponsorship ghosted her." Marlene's lips curved just slightly, not in triumph, but in something quieter. Accountability. The clock didn't tick loudly, but it pulsed. 14 days. Each one spelled out in black ink at the top of the certified letter, now tacked to the fridge of 119 Marigold Crest Lane. Connor had pinned it there in a panic. Sadie hadn't looked at it since day one. She couldn't stand the way it stared back, like it was gloating. On day 3, she called a lawyer. He was young, a cousin of one of her brand partners. He wore pastel suits and smiled like he already knew she was right, until he read the deed. "She never transferred title," he said, his voice more nervous than confident now. "There's no case here. You've been occupants, not owners." Sadie stared at him from across the granite island. "What about verbal agreements, promissory intent, financial duress?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "She didn't threaten or coerce you. She paid for it outright. And she never gave up legal control. There's no lease, no contract, no standing." Sadie's voice went sharp. "So you're telling me an old woman can just take it back?" He didn't answer. By day 5, Connor called his Aunt Lynn, his late father's sister, Marlene's in-law, a woman who once said she didn't get involved in drama, but loved sending church devotionals on Facebook. "Lynn," Connor pleaded, "can you just talk to her?" A long pause on the other end. "I did talk to her, Connor," Lynn said finally. "She sent me the documents. She owns the house. That's not drama. That's just facts. She's ruining us. He's enforcing a boundary. Maybe it's time someone did." He didn't call her again. By day 7, Jenna stood at the edge of the driveway, arms crossed as movers carted out Sadie's staging accents, gold-framed prints, a velvet chair, 2 boxes labeled collab gifts. "You shouldn't have said that out loud, Sadie," Jenna muttered. Sadie looked up, cheeks flushed. "It was a joke." It wasn't funny. Sadie clenched her jaw and turned away, barking orders at the movers. Inside, the house began to thin out. Empty hangers rattled in closets. The smell of lavender candles faded into the drywall. The kitchen, once curated for Instagram reels, now echoed with every slammed drawer. On day 10, Marlene parked quietly outside a nonprofit donation center on South Lamar. She walked through a sunlit lobby with laminated posters on the walls. Dignity starts with a safe bed. A woman in scrubs greeted her. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Marlene said. "I'll be reclaiming a furnished house. Some of it is too new to be thrown away. I'd like to donate what I don't need." The woman blinked. "Are you moving?" "No," Marlene replied. "I'm returning." She filled out a form, listed items by room, circled available in 4 days. The woman gave a tight smile. "You'd be surprised how many people donate out of rage." Marlene's eyes held steady. "This isn't rage, it's relief." That night, the street was quiet. No party lights, no music. Just the soft hum of a ceiling fan behind a second-stream window, and Sadie's silhouette pacing behind it. Marlene watched from her car across the street, eyes calm, engine off. She wasn't spying. She was studying a retreat. A retreat camouflaged as resistance. They hadn't packed fast. They hadn't packed smart. They kept hoping the wind would shift. It didn't. On day 13, Jordan called. "Keys still in your name. Title clean. No interference." "Good," Marlene said. "Let's be ready for Monday." "And the locksmith?" She glanced at her calendar, already marked. Day 15, 9 a.m. sharp. The house was quiet, but not still. It pulsed with the noise of endings. Marlene stepped onto the front porch of 119 Marigold Crest Lane as a dolly thudded over the threshold. A box, labeled "Bathroom His," rattled as Connor wheeled it to the curb, face red with exertion and something else, shame. Inside the doorway, the air smelled of dust, cardboard, and tension. The scent of lemon cleaner barely masked the sourness of stress, sweat, and bitter words left hanging in the air. Sadie appeared before Marlene could even knock, her body blocking the doorway like she owned the frame. Her eyes were swollen, not with tears, but with sleepless anger. She wore a matching loungewear set that looked curated but was clearly lived in. The lipstick she'd applied was too bright for this hour and too forced for this mood. "You're a cold woman," she spat, voice shaking but sharp. Marlene didn't flinch. She looked past her, scanning the hollowed-out interior. Shelves bare, floors scattered with flattened packing paper. One couch cushion turned on its side like someone had kicked it during an argument. "Gold built this house," Marlene said calmly. "Hot air didn't." Sadie's jaw clenched. She stepped aside but didn't say, "Come in." Marlene entered anyway. Every room was in mid-disassembly. The kitchen was a skeleton, coffee mugs stuffed with bubble wrap, the wine rack empty except for one bottle of cheap Merlot and a corkscrew that had lost its handle. The gallery wall of Sadie's curated couple selfies was already gone, leaving behind tiny nail holes and clean rectangles of untouched paint. Connor passed her again, this time with a tote bag full of chargers and tangled cords. He didn't meet her eyes. Marlene didn't stop him. Outside, a neighbor couple walked their golden doodle. The woman glanced toward the house, then whispered something to her husband behind cupped fingers. He nodded. No one waved. No one offered help. No casseroles or neighborhood solidarity this time. Back inside, Sadie was in the living room, angrily peeling decals off a mirror. The words, "Love where you live," came off in pieces, the final E tearing jaggedly, leaving adhesive residue behind. "You think this makes you strong?" Sadie said over her shoulder. "Taking back something you gave?" "I think it makes me sane," Marlene replied. "You thought a gift was a leash. You never noticed there was a lock on the other end." Sadie laughed without humor. "You're pathetic." "No," Marlene said. "I'm prepared." She watched as Connor emerged again, this time carrying 2 shoeboxes and a wedding photo. The corner of the frame had chipped. He adjusted it in his arms like it mattered now. The silence stretched between them until he finally spoke. "I didn't think it would come to this," he said, his voice low. Marlene tilted her head. That's because you weren't paying attention. His mouth moved like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. He walked past her again, the shoeboxes bumping against his leg. Marlene looked around once more, taking it in. The hollowed corners, the scuffed baseboards, the air that no longer smelled like her son's presence or her daughter-in-law's ambition. Just two people exiting a fantasy they never earned. She turned without another word and stepped outside into the warm Austin breeze. As she reached her car, her phone buzzed. A new text. Stady, you'll regret this, when you're alone. Marlene stared at the screen for a long second, thumb hovering over the message before tucking the phone away in her purse. Unread reply, no reaction. The engine hummed to life as she pulled away from the curb. The silence hit her first, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that echoes. Marlene stepped over the threshold of 119 Marigold Crest Lane, now hollow and officially hers again. Her footsteps rang out against the hardwood, unsoftened by rugs or furniture. The door creaked as it eased shut behind her, sealing her inside a shell that once housed entitlement. She didn't knock. She didn't call ahead. She used her key, the original one Jordan had handed her after closing, and turned it with finality. The air smelled like old air freshener and sweat. A single wine cork lay abandoned near the baseboard. The living room was stripped bare, except for a smear of something dark on the wall above where a decorative mirror had hung. Probably red wine. Definitely carelessness. She walked slowly, fingers trailing along surfaces, noting the blemishes that hadn't existed when she handed them the keys. The trim near the hallway closet was chipped, like someone had shoved a suitcase against it in a hurry. The window shades in the guest room were torn, one side yanked down harder than the other, now left hanging at a crooked angle. A sharp Texas sunbeam slashed across the wall through the rip, exposing the dust. In the kitchen, the backsplash tiles were stained near the stovetop, faint outlines of where spice racks and ambitions once sat. She stood in the middle of the open space where their couch used to be, where Sadie had staged couple selfies and brand shoutouts. Her heels clicked once, then stopped. She sank slowly to the floor, her skirt folding carefully under her knees, and pressed her palm against the cool hardwood. She exhaled, deeply. No performance, no noise, no pretense. This was ownership, this stillness, this honest emptiness. They wanted a symbol, she whispered aloud. I wanted a home. She leaned back against the bare wall, closed her eyes for a moment, and let herself sit in the vacancy they'd left behind. Not just of furniture, of substance, of gratitude. Then her eyes opened, sharp again, purposeful. She stood, smoothed her blouse, and reached for her phone. The call rang twice. Jordan, she said when he answered. Let's stage it for resale. He paused. You're sure? I'm not sentimental, she replied, but I do believe in clean slates. He chuckled. I'll get the stagers in by Wednesday. Should list by the weekend, this market's hot. I'm not chasing the market, she said evenly. Just the message. She walked to the upstairs landing and looked out the window. A moving truck rumbled 2 streets over. Birds pecked at the neighbor's lawn. Somewhere a dog barked. It all felt normal. Beautifully so. Once it's sold, she continued, I want the profit placed in a trust. Not Connor's. Something new, quiet, purposeful. Jordan's voice shifted. Something tells me this won't be a scholarship with their names on it. No, Marlene said. It'll be for someone who builds more than they post. There was a beat of silence. Then, well, Jordan said, funny you mention the sale. Someone already put in an offer. Marlene blinked. Excuse me? Cash, over asking. Local buyer. They saw your receipt post, found the listing coming soon, and made an early bid. All in your name. She walked back down the stairs, the quiet tapping of her shoes the only sound in the house. Her grip on the phone tightened slightly, but not from worry. From the sudden shift in wind. The offer came, wrapped in sincerity, and no strings. Marlene was standing in the aisle of the garden section at Lowe's, eyeing a potted rosemary bush, when her phone buzzed. Jordan's name lit up the screen. I assume this is about the house, she said, one hand already reaching for a cart. Yeah, and you're going to want to sit for this, he he replied. You remember that receipt post? The one you dropped like a quiet bomb? I do. Well, someone saw it. Local woman. She tracked the coming soon listing, then called my office before we even got photos up. Full cash offer, no contingencies. Wants to close in 14 days. Marlene lifted the pot gently into the cart. The scent of crushed herbs clung to her palms. And who is she? Name's Judith Raynar, Georgian said. Retired school teacher, 62, selling her 3-bed down in San Marcos. Wants to move closer to her daughter. Says she was raised to believe if someone shows you who they are, you either step away or step in. She liked your style. Marlene smiled faintly, brushing dirt off her fingers. And she wants the house? She wants a home, he said. Your kind of home. Jordan let the number hang in the air before adding, over asking. You're walking with 80 grand clear after fees. Marlene paused beside a shelf of wind chimes. One swung softly in the breeze of the overhead vent, making a thin metallic music. Accept it. No counter? No counter, she said. I don't haggle with people who come to the table honest. Back at home, she printed the offer letter, read it once, and slid it into her desk drawer, next to the file where she'd stored the revocation notice and the unsigned deed. Clean exits deserved quiet filing. The check followed 2 days later, crisp and perfect. Jordan hand-delivered it in an envelope with a satisfied grin. I've seen a lot of revenge sales, he said. This one's got style. Marlene didn't deposit it. She placed it in a safe under a stack of older tax returns. She wasn't in a rush. Letting go of that house wasn't about the money. That evening, her phone buzzed. Again. Planner. She let it ring. Again. She placed the phone face down and returned to slicing lemons for her tea. No voicemail, just the ghost of his name, blinking and then vanishing. She sipped slowly. The silence in the house was undisturbed. And that, finally, felt right. Later that night, Marlene opened her laptop. Not to shop, not to scroll, to redirect. She opened a new trust file with her financial advisor. It would be established under a placeholder name, Whitaker Quiet Power Fund. The purpose? To support women over 50 re-entering finance, mentorships, and family emergency grants. Connor's name wouldn't appear. And Sadie's? It would be explicitly excluded. Clause 4.1. No disbursement or asset transfer shall be granted to or on behalf of Sadie Rose Whitaker, born July 9, 1989, under any circumstance. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity made concrete. The cursor blinked at the end of the clause. She let it sit there a moment before clicking Save. Outside, the night air stirred the wind chime she had installed that morning on her own front porch. A low, wandering note drifted through the screen. Inside, the only thing that echoed was control, hers and hers alone. The envelope arrived with the kind of pretension only desperation carries. Cream cardstock, gold foil return address, embossed initials on the flap. Marlene turned it over in her hands as she stood at her kitchen counter, the morning light casting hard angles across her granite countertops. Her tea had just steeped. The citrus peel floated at the rim of the cup, untouched. She slid it open cleanly. Notice of intent to pursue or purchase emotional harm, public humiliation, and reputational loss. Client, Sadie Rose Whitaker. Filed by Glass and Stone, LLP. Marlene read it once, then again. A slow smile tugged at the edge of her mouth. Not amusement, not anger. Something closer to disbelief. It was dressed like a threat, but sounded like a tantrum in cursive. The claims were laughably vague. That she had caused undue stress by weaponizing ownership, that Sadie had suffered reputational loss from implied online retaliation, that the psychological environment of the home had been influenced by covert hostility. Marlene set the pages down and reached for her phone. "Howard," she said when her longtime attorney picked up, "we've got a letter, and it reads like a bad novella." He chuckled. "I'll come by this afternoon. You bring the tea, I'll bring the receipts." By 3:00 p.m. they were seated in Marlene's sunroom, documents spread neatly between them. wire transfers, property tax statements, notarized deed filings, and a timeline that showed exactly who said what and when. Howard flipped through the pages with the same calm detachment he used in litigation briefs. "She's grasping," he said finally. "She's trying to retroactively define loss of entitlement as harm. It won't hold." "I want a response," Marlene said. "Sharp, but clean." Howard nodded. "We'll issue a formal rebuttal, evidence attached, and a cease and desist for public defamation just in case she's thinking of another soft focus monologue, and the video from the party." Howard raised an eyebrow. "You have footage?" Jenna had sent it. A full minute-long clip of Sadie's toast, the exact moment she called Marlene the woman we tolerate for her wallet, followed by laughter, and Connor's silence. "It's in the folder," Marlene said. "Add it." That evening, the response was sent. Direct, surgical, signed and certified. 2 copies, one to Sadie's lawyer, one to Sadie. By noon the next day, Sadie's Instagram vanished. Her TikTok? Gone. Her lifestyle blog redirected to a blank landing page that read, "Under maintenance." The influencer had gone, invisible. Connor called. The voicemail transcribed on Marlene's screen was messy, not from grammar, but grief. "She's not doing well. She's unraveling. She says she's never felt this humiliated. Can we just talk, you and me?" Marlene let the silence sit for a full hour before responding. She typed slowly, "That happens when glass castles shatter." The reply came minutes later. "I'm coming by. I need to ask you something. Please?" At 6:17 p.m., Connor knocked. He stood on the porch in jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, holding nothing but a manila envelope of his own. He looked older, not in years, but in spirit, like life had caught up all at once. Marlene opened the door without a word and led him inside. They sat in the living room, no small talk. He held the envelope in his lap like it was burning through. "I just need to know," he said, "after everything, am I still in the will?" The question didn't sting. It didn't surprise her, but it did clarify something. Marlene didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied him. This man who once scraped his knees on her driveway, who used to draw her birthday cards in crayon, the boy who'd become a shadow next to a louder woman's spotlight. And she realized it wasn't just Sadie who had disappeared into someone else's idea of worth. It was Connor, too. He had stood in her doorway like a sun, but he left without an answer. Marlene didn't sleep that night. Not from anger, not even from grief, just clarity, the kind that arrives when excuses finally run out, and what's left is choice. By morning, her appointment was confirmed. The same office, same walnut-paneled conference room where she and her husband had drafted the first version of their will 23 years ago. He had passed 4 months later. That day, Connor had brought her hot chocolate and sat beside her on the couch, holding her hand without needing to say anything. But the boy who did that had not been the man standing on her porch yesterday. She arrived 5 minutes early. Monica Raines, her estate attorney of 11 years, greeted her with a steady handshake and zero surprise. "I figured I'd see you soon," Monica said, gently pushing a leather-bound folio across the table. "You want to make changes?" "I want to make it true," Marlene replied, setting her reading glasses on the bridge of her nose. "No placeholders, no optimism." Monica's pen clicked open with a soft snap. They began to draft. Beneficiaries: 70% of total estate assets to Central Texas Women's Housing Trust for transitional shelters and financial literacy programs. 20% to fund a merit-based Quiet Power Scholarship for women over 50 entering finance or nonprofit administration. "You'll want a name attached," Monica noted, tapping her pen. "Something permanent. Legacy grade." Marlene tilted her head, then reached for her phone. She typed a message to Jordan. "Need help naming a scholarship, something precise, no fluff." The reply came back within a minute. "Jordan, Quiet Power Fund. The way you move. People notice, but only after they've underestimated you." Marlene smiled. "There it is," she told Monica. "Call it the Quiet Power Fund." And the remaining 10%? Monica asked, eyes sharp. To Connor? No, Marlene said. Not unless… Monica lifted an eyebrow. Unless what? That 10% goes into a silent trust, she explained. No disbursements, no contact. It's for any biological grandchild, born or adopted, who independently applies and meets one criterion, which is documented acts of kindness, not charity work, not photo ops, quiet kindness, something real. Monica's lips curved slightly. That's a very specific kind of future bet. It's the only one I'll take, Marlene said. They continued with the usual paperwork, updated power of attorney, and digital asset instructions. The entire process took just under 2 hours. When they finished, Monica slid the new will into a fireproof envelope. You've left nothing unsaid, she said softly. That's the goal, Marlene replied, standing and smoothing the sleeves of her blouse. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just no longer pretending they showed up. Outside, the sun had risen high, bright and wide and completely indifferent. She walked through the downtown sidewalk heat like it couldn't touch her. By the time she reached home, her phone buzzed again. Unknown sender, no text, just a name on a delivery alert. Envelope hand-delivered by Jenna L. Caro. Status: delivered at front door, 1:41 p.m. Marlene stepped onto the porch, where a pale yellow envelope lay on the welcome mat. It had no return address, just her name, written in careful cursive ink that wavered, slightly, at the edges. She picked it up slowly. The envelope weighed almost nothing, and yet Marlene didn't open it for a full hour. It sat on her entryway table, the yellow paper glowing softly under the late afternoon sun. Her name had been written in slow, looping cursive, careful, but slightly shaky, like the hand that penned it wasn't used to saying what it really meant. When she finally slid it open with the edge of a butter knife, the scent of vanilla stationery and faint perfume curled into the air. Lilac, maybe. Inside was a single sheet of notepaper, cream with a faint border of ivy. Dear Marlene, I've started this letter 3 times. I hope this version finally gets it right. I want to say thank you. I've never seen someone take back power so gracefully. No yelling. No revenge porn. No cryptic Bible quotes. Just facts. Just truth. You were quiet, and it echoed. Marlene stopped reading for a second and let the sentence settle. You were quiet, and it echoed. She continued, I never told you what I overheard the night of the party. Maybe I should have. Maybe it was cowardly that I didn't. But Sadie? She didn't just make that toast. She laughed about you all night. I've enclosed a few photos. Screenshots, really. From Sadie's Finsta. One of them is you. Your back turned, and she captioned it, She's only here for the check and the clout. Another shows the empty gift table with the caption, All this, and she brought a candle from TJ Maxx. There were printouts tucked behind the letter. Marlene flipped through them carefully. One was a grainy photo of her standing near the fireplace at the party, holding a champagne flute. Sadie had zoomed in on her expression, calm, unreadable, and added the laughing emoji with a $sign tongue. Another photo, the charcuterie spread, captioned, She thinks this makes her relatable. Bless. It wasn't anger that tightened Marlene's jaw. It was confirmation. There was no misunderstanding, no misread moment. Sadie hadn't slipped. She'd aimed. The final page was a screenshot of a text exchange between Sadie and an unknown friend. Sadie. She just exists like her checkbook is personality. Sadie. Connor said to be nice, but if I hear her brag about tax brackets again, I'll scream. Friend. Lolal. Sadie. If we post her laughing at something dumb, can we go viral? Irony Queen vibes. Beneath the screenshots, Jenna had added one more line. I'm sorry, and I'm here. If you ever want a neighbor who doesn't look away. There was a soft knock at her door an hour later. Jordan, I got your message, he said. About the Sadie file Jenna gave you. Marlene handed him the folder without a word. He flipped through the pages, whistling low. If you release this, her influencer career's toast. That brand deal with Saul & Co? Gone. No one partners with petty once receipts come out. Marlene took a slow sip of her chamomile tea. That's not why she's disappearing. Jordan arched a brow. It's not? She's disappearing because she tried to cash in on cruelty. And people are better at spotting it than she thought. He nodded, closed the folder and handed it back. You're letting her slide? I'm letting her fade, Marlene said. There's a difference. She penned a small thank you card for Jenna that night, just 2 lines, in her neatest print. You didn't owe me honesty, but you gave it anyway. That's something worth remembering. She was sealing the envelope when her phone rang again. Connor. She stared at the screen a moment, then tapped, accept. Hi, Mom. Her silence stretched just long enough for the word to sound smaller. I just wanted to talk. She set the envelope for Jenna down beside her tea. Then speak, she said. Marlene answers, just once. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It was earned. Connor sat across from Marlene in her sunroom, the late afternoon light slanting through the blinds in long gold stripes. The air smelled faintly of citrus oil and old wood, clean, quiet, untouched by chaos. He hadn't spoken in 30 seconds. His hands twisted in his lap like he was trying to wring answers from them. I miss the old you, he said finally. His voice cracked, soft and boyish. The you who used to leave the porch light on. The one who made soup when I was sick and taped a $20 0-cent bill to my textbooks just because. Marlene sipped her tea without responding. Steam curled past her lips like smoke from a gun not yet holstered. I miss the real you, she said, setting her cup down. You know, the version of you who once asked how I was without needing something. He looked down, face tightening. He never meant to hurt you. She folded her hands. But you did. Every time you stayed silent while she chipped away at me. Every time you stood 2 feet away and chose absence over honesty. His eyes welled. She saw it happen, the way pride tried to swallow grief but failed. I was stuck, he said. Sadie. She made it hard to choose between peace and conflict. You didn't have to choose between peace and conflict, Connor, Marlene said, her voice sharp but even. You had to choose between peace and me, and you didn't. A tear slipped down his cheek. He didn't wipe it. You think I'm like her. I think you let her define the parts of you that once had courage. She stood, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled out an old photo. The 2 of them on a hiking trail. Him maybe 10 years old, missing a front tooth and beaming. She handed it to him. I raced that boy, she said. The one who carried my bag up that hill when my back gave out. The one who didn't let go of my hand on the way down. I don't know where he went, but I miss him. Connor studied the photo. His mouth twitched, trying to form something. Defense, maybe. But all that came out was a whisper. I wish I could take it back. You can't. He swallowed. So what happens now? You move forward, and so do I. Her words were gentle, not cold, but final. He looked at her then, really looked. Not as the mother who'd given, but the woman who had reclaimed. Am I out? He asked. The question didn't sound angry, just tired. You're not erased, she said. You're just not entitled, not anymore. The weight of it landed in the space between them like a third presence. I'm not angry with you, Connor, she added after a moment. I'm disappointed. That's not the same. She stepped forward and opened her arms, not wide, not dramatic, just enough. He came to her like someone crossing water. She held him, briefly, just once, her hands pressed flat to his back. She didn't say I love you. She didn't need to. When he pulled away, he tried to speak again, but she shook her head. That house, she said quietly, was the last thing I'll give you without asking who you are first. The final signature didn't tremble. It landed smooth and centered, like punctuation at the end of a long, controlled sentence. Marlene slid the pen across the polished surface of Monica's office desk. The legal folder before her now held the final revision to her estate, trust disbursements, and business filings. Her fingerprints were on every page, and none of theirs. This one dissolves Whitaker Holdings, Monica confirmed. initialing the document beside Marlene's name. "You've untethered yourself from all past business assets." Sadie's name never even brushed the paperwork. "Exactly how I wanted it," Marlene said. The LLC that once protected her wealth was now obsolete. What needed protection had already been reclaimed, and what remained would be redirected. She stood and gathered her coat, nodding once to Monica. "I appreciate your steadiness." "You don't need steady," Monica replied with a faint smile. "You are steady." The Austin breeze slapped her cheeks as she stepped outside. Dry, brisk, unapologetic. Downtown traffic pulsed behind her, but she walked at a calm pace, clutching her leather bag with one hand and a sealed manila envelope in the other. Inside was the final check. The remaining profit from the house Sadie had tried to turn into a stage. Back at home, she sat at her desk and opened her laptop. Her screensaver, a single quote in pale blue type. "Power doesn't ask, it rewrites." She navigated to the Quiet Power Fund's grant portal, uploaded the funds, and designated them for the launch of a new mentorship initiative for women over 50 re-entering workforce sectors that had long since aged them out. Finance, health, hair, law, construction. The fields didn't matter. The message did. She attached a note to the first recipient, for the woman who outgrew silence and decided to charge rent on her wisdom. After submitting, she reached again for the envelope Jordan had given her the day before, a certificate of donation tied to her original house sale. She'd asked that the check not go through a bank she shared with Connor. There would be no trail. Not anymore. The last tether was cut that morning, a silent removal of Connor's name from her remaining accounts, not out of vengeance, but out of peace. There would be no accidental inheritances, no confusion about what had been earned and what had simply been tolerated. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Media, inquiry. Subject, Boundary Reclamation and Modern Elder Advocacy. Interview request. She opened the message. "Ms. Whitaker, your quiet act of reclaiming a home and your measured response in the face of online defamation has inspired a wave of interest in elder financial autonomy. We would love to feature your story on our podcast, Second Wind. We're told you recently launched a scholarship fund for women over 50. We'd like to discuss what led to this and how others can do the same. No compensation needed, just your voice." Marlene read the email twice. The irony wasn't lost on her. In a digital world where everyone was fighting to be heard louder, she'd done the opposite, moved softly, precisely, and now the world had leaned in to listen. She typed one sentence in reply. "I'll do it, on one condition. No questions about my family." The room didn't shimmer with light. It glowed with something warmer. Marlene stepped into the private banquet hall of the Austin Women's Foundation, her heels silent on polished concrete, her posture quiet but commanding. 40 chairs encircled linen-covered tables, soft jazz spilling from hidden ceiling speakers. No flashbulbs, no hashtags, just voices rising gently above silverware and candlelight. At the front, a simple black placard, "An evening for quiet power," honoring Marlene Whitaker, benefactor and builder. She stood still for a moment, letting the scene settle over her. The scent of lemon-roasted chicken and basil risotto floated through the air. Crisp napkins folded with precision. But what caught her most was the sound. Gratitude without performance. Laughter not aimed at anyone. No one scanning the room to see if they'd been seen. "Mr. Whitaker?" a voice asked, tentative. She turned to see a young woman, maybe 27, sharp suit, wire-rimmed glasses, notebook clutched to her chest like armor. "I'm sorry," the woman said, nervously brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. "I just wanted to say thank you. I got one of the early Quiet Power mentorship grants. You didn't know me, but you funded my Series 7 prep. I passed." Marlene's lips curved. "What's your name?" "Lydia," she beamed. "I start at an investment firm next month. Real one, downtown." "You earned that," Marlene said. "No," Lydia whispered. "You gave me a door I didn't even know I was allowed to knock on." Marlene placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Then break every one you find locked." The dinner began with no announcements, no speeches, Just course after elegant course, delivered with grace, as if the food knew it wasn't the point. At the end of the main, Jordan approached, a glass of wine in one hand, the other tucked in his jacket pocket. "You clean up better than anyone here," he said with a wink. She smiled, tilting her head. "You're just surprised the dress still fits." And it did. The same slate bulb wrap dress she wore at the housewarming party Sadie had turned into a mockery. But now it hung differently on her shoulders. Not looser, lighter. Not tailored, claimed. Jordan looked around. Not bad for a woman they once tolerated for her wallet. She raised her glass toward him. "They can keep the noise." At dessert, the lights dimmed just slightly, and a woman with salt-streaked curls and a warm, commanding voice stood near the head table. "Marlene," she said, "you didn't ask for this spotlight, but we needed you in it." Soft clapping filled the room. Then, rising, real applause. No cameras prompting it. No cue cards. Marlene rose slowly, heart steady. She didn't deliver a speech. Just stood beside the table, raised her glass, and said one line. To everyone who didn't wait for permission to change. No laughter, just the clink of glasses raised in quiet respect. Afterward, she lingered by the doorway as guests filtered out, each one stopping briefly to shake her hand or nod. Lydia passed again, smiling so wide it looked like something permanent had finally clicked into place. She paused. "Miss Whitaker?" "Yeah." Lydia looked down for a second, then back up, eyes glistening. "You changed everything for me." Marlene's breath caught, not in shock, but in recognition. The last time someone had said those words to her, it was Connor, 5 years old, the night she taught him to ride a bike. But this time, she didn't have to steady the handlebars. The house looked different now, not in structure, but in spirit. Marlene slowed her car to a crawl as she rounded the bend on Marigold Crest Lane. The familiar white stucco caught the early spring light, warm and soft, like it finally belonged to the land beneath it. No flashy lawn ornaments, no curated spaces, no lens-ready distractions, just a modest sign tucked into the flower bed. "Home is where your hands work." A young couple knelt in the dirt near the front porch, gently patting the soil around a fresh cluster of marigolds. The petals burst in gold and orange like little suns waking up for the season. The woman laughed at something the man said, and it was a real sound, unfiltered, unposted. Marlene pulled over, idling at the curb. The windows were open, not for show, but for breeze. A paper drawing fluttered against the inside of the front glass, thick crayon lines, stick figures with giant smiles, a heart in the corner. A child's world, not an aesthetic. She didn't feel envy, not even nostalgia, only peace. They'd made it theirs, truly, without spectacle, without theft. She let her eyes roam over the property. The once perfectly staged front garden now had mismatched pots and a rogue tomato plant, leaning toward the sun. The porch furniture didn't match. There was a single pair of muddy sneakers left by the doormat. Lived in, not performed. Her phone buzzed in the console. She glanced down. A new email from the Quiet Power Fund's admin line. Subject: Scholarship Award Update. Lydia Tran, accepted. Message: We're thrilled to inform you Lydia has been accepted into the Executive Leadership Bridge Program at UT Austin. She'll be the first Quiet Power Fellow to enter a dual MBA track. Her message: I didn't think women like me were allowed rooms like that, until Marlene made one. Marlene smiled. Slow, full. She didn't respond right away. She just sat there, watching the marigolds breathe in the wind, watching a life that had nothing to do with her bloom exactly where another had failed. She didn't honk, didn't wave. She didn't need to be seen to know she'd made a mark. Eventually, she pulled away from the curb and turned back toward her neighborhood. Her own street came into view like a secret kept well. The trees were older here, the homes smaller, but they stood with a different kind of strength, earned, not bought. She parked in her drive. No motion lights, no ring cameras, just a porch swing she used every Sunday, and a door that creaked in the same spot it always had. Inside, the air smelled like cinnamon bark and lemon oil. Her coat went on the hook, her keys into the brass bowl. She kicked off her shoes, patted in socked feet across the hardwood. She'd refinished herself last fall. On her desk, a single leather-bound ledger sat open, the same one she used to track every financial milestone since the year she was widowed. Each line a choice, each column a turning. She picked up her pen, paused, then wrote in neat block letters across the final page. No longer owed, no longer overlooked. She capped the pen. No parade, no audience. Just the closing of a chapter written in full, without apology, without edit. She leaned back in her chair, the sun washing across her lap, and thought about how everyone had once said the house was the win. They were wrong. She was. The house may have stood still, but she'd moved on, and up, in every way that mattered.